Oh, hey there, bestie. Have I got some tea for you? Let me tell you about a love story gone wrong. And no, I'm not talking about your favorite rom com. I'm talking about business and government during the Gilded Age and Progressive Era. Two eras that started out all cozy but ended in drama, breakups, and betrayals. Back in the late 1800s, America was booming. Factories were cranking out goods, railroads were popping up faster than TikTok trends, and a handful of businessmen, or should I say, robber barons, were making obscene amounts of money. But the government? Totally MIA. They were just standing off to the side, smiling, nodding, and letting it all happen. You ever heard of laissez faire economics? That's French for you do you, boo. And that was pretty much what the government's attitude was towards big business. They didn't regulate anything, which meant companies could do whatever they wanted. And oh, did they. Monopolies were everywhere. Standard Oil, Carnegie Steel, the railroad companies, they owned everything. And if you weren't one of them, you were probably struggling. Factory workers, miserable. Wages, laughably low. Working conditions, hazardous, deadly, and downright disgusting. Oh, and the corruption? Let's talk about that. These businessmen weren't just running industries, they were buying politicians like they were on a Black Friday shopping spree. Take Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall, literal puppet masters of New York politics. You need a job? A favor? A place to live? Sure! Just make sure you vote the right way on election day. And let's not forget the labor strikes. Workers had had enough. But when they tried to fight for better pay and hours, the government sent in troops to break them up. Not to protect the workers, oh no, but to protect the bosses. The Pullman strike of 1894 ended with federal troops being sent in to shut it down with violence. Oh, and if you think businesses were independent, think again. The railroad industry wouldn't have been so powerful without government land grants and subsidies. The Transcontinental Railroad, which was finished in 1869, was funded by taxpayers, but the profits? Oh, honey, those went straight into the pockets of the railroad tycoons. People started to demand government regulation, and in 1887, Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act, the first federal attempt to regulate business. It wasn't much, but it was the first sign that the government was starting to wake up. Now, you know every scandal eventually gets exposed. Enter the Progressive Era, where the government finally decided to grow a backbone. Journalists, muckrakers as they were called, started spilling the tea on how bad things really were. Ever read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair? I don't recommend reading it while eating because he exposed exactly what was happening in the meatpacking industry. And honey, let's just say people were not thrilled to find out they'd been eating mystery meat with a side of rat droppings. And that was just the beginning. Ida Tarbell put Rockefeller on blast for his shady business moves. Jacob Riis photographed the horrifying conditions of the slums and tenements and how the other half lives. People saw the receipts and they were mad. And then, boom, here comes Theodore Roosevelt in 1901, not about to let businesses run wild anymore. He saw these huge monopolies and was like, yeah, no, that's not happening on my watch. He actually enforced the Sherman Antitrust Act, which technically had been around for years, but it had been collecting dust because, shocker, no one actually wanted to use it. But Teddy, oh, he used it. He broke up Standard Oil, cracked down on big business, and made sure the government was actually calling the shots again. Oh, and speaking of game-changing government moves, 1913 brought the Federal Reserve Act, which created a national banking system to stabilize the economy. Before this, bank failures were common and people could lose everything overnight. This was a huge shift in government control over the economy. So, did business and the government really break up? Oh, honey, this relationship was way too complicated for a clean break. If Facebook had existed back then, their status would have definitely been "it's complicated." Sure, the progressive era changed the game. The government wasn't just standing on the sidelines anymore. Teddy Roosevelt was busting trust, the Federal Reserve was stepping in to keep banks from imploding, and new labor laws meant workers actually had some protections. Compared to the Gilded Age, when business basically had the government on speed dial for favors, things looked very different. But here's the thing. Business wasn't just going to roll over and hand over control. Even with new laws, businesses found ways to hold on to their power. The Sherman Antitrust Act broke up some monopolies, but companies got creative. Many just reorganized themselves into holding companies, still controlling massive industries, but under different names. And while labor laws promised workers shorter hours and better conditions, that didn't stop employers from using every trick in the book to keep wages low and unions weak. The government stepped in to regulate industry, but businesses quickly learned that if they played the game right, through lobbying, campaign donations, and a few closed door meetings, they could still keep a lot of influence. And let's talk about taxes. The 16th Amendment introduced the income tax, finally giving the government the funds to actually enforce all these new regulations. But guess who immediately started pushing for loopholes and lower tax rates? That's right, big business. And they had plenty of friends in high places who were more than happy to listen. By the 1920s, the government, after years of breaking up monopolies and regulating industry, was once again cozying up to business. President Calvin Coolidge even declared the business of America is business. If that's not a full circle moment, I don't know what is. And if you thought business and government have fully gone their separate ways, the Red Scare of the 1920s proved otherwise. Suddenly, any worker demanding better wages or safer conditions wasn't just a frustrated employee. They were labeled a radical or a communist. Strikes were crushed, unions were weakened, and once again, the government found itself working with big business rather than against it. So, if someone asks, did the government take control of business in the progressive era? The answer is yes, but also no. The relationship changed, absolutely, but it wasn't a total breakup. It was a back and forth, on and off thing, a constant push and pull. The government put up guardrails, but businesses found ways to work around them. The government cracked down, but then backed off when it suited them. This wasn't the end of their relationship, just the start of a new, even more complicated chapter. And that, my friends, is why the relationship between business and government wasn't just a breakup. It was a messy, dramatic will they, won't they power struggle that shaped the economy for decades. Whew, that was some really hot tea. But what do you think? Should the government have stepped in sooner? Did the progressive era really change things, or was it just a band aid on a bigger problem? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, if you love spilling the historical tea as much as I do, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the drama of history. Because trust me, there's always more tea to spill.